Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel, and thank you for joining me in another video today. As you can see, there's a little bit of a new look going on here in the studio, so it's an absolute pleasure to invite you here into this space today. Now, if this is your first time here, this is the Aftershave Aristocrat. My name is Anthony, and this is where I'll be doing first impressions and reviews on a whole range of different scents and fragrances. However, something a little bit different today, which was actually a suggestion from one of my viewers, because the channel has reached 100 subscribers. So you've all been very kindly sending in your questions, because today I'm going to be doing a Q&A video. So I'm really looking forward to doing this. Some really great questions have been sent in from some of you. But before we get started, let's roll those titles. Okay, welcome back and thank you for your patience. Now, before we get started, I just want to apologise if you hear any strange noises. There's a young lad in my neighbourhood who has recently got himself a quad bike. And the thing is absolutely huge. I've no idea where he's got it from, but it sounds like a 3-litre straight-piped V6 or something. It's absolutely ridiculous. But hopefully we won't get disturbed. So once again, thank you for sending in your questions. Some really good questions here. So we're just going to get straight into it. And the first question has been sent in by my viewer, Luminous Lucille. So thank you for sending in this question. And they want to know, do I have any scents that put me in a mind of folk horror? Yes, actually, but it's not one that I currently own. And it's probably not one that I'm going to be able to own either. It was made by a company called Lush, which was very popular here in the United Kingdom. Many of you are probably familiar with Lush. Unfortunately, a lot of their stores did close down. Now, this particular fragrance was called Tramp. And it was actually a friend of mine that gave it to me, and it had a really kind of like quite strong, potent smell of oak moss. It was very earthy. In fact, it was probably one of the most kind of like earthy, musky kind of smelling fragrances that I've ever come across. But unfortunately, that fragrance has been discontinued. I have looked for it online, but I'm having a little bit of trouble trying to track it down. But that particular fragrance, for some reason, made me think or reminded me of a film called Sleepy Hollow, the one with Johnny Depp in it. I don't know why, but it just kind of reminded me of like some of the scenery in that film. It's quite like a dark, almost kind of like misty, smoky film. And there's kind of like a lot of woodland and old kind of buildings in there, and it just kind of made me think, do you know what, like if you could smell a film or smell a scene in a movie, this fragrance would be it. It just smelled of just like mossy, woody, fresh earth, kind of like an almost kind of like a Victorian kind of smell, if that makes sense. But the closest fragrance that I actually currently own to that, which also makes me think of the film Sleepy Hollow, is a fragrance called Death's Elixir by a company called Cursed Fragrances. Now, some of you may have seen my video where I did first impressions and reviews on some of the Cursed fragrances, so you may already be familiar with that one. If you haven't, I will drop a link to that in the description below if you want to go and have a look at that. But yeah, so Death's Elixir also contains notes of oak moss, amongst various other things as well. It hasn't got as much of a strong kind of like mossy aroma as Tramp did, but it's kind of like it's a similar fragrance. And it still has that kind of like earthy tone, that earthy vibe to it. So yes, so to answer your question, you know, have I any fragrances that put me in mind of folk horror? So the first one would be Tramp by Lush, and coming in at a close second is the Death's Elixir by Cursed Fragrances. So I hope that answers your question, and thank you very much for sending that in. So the next question that has been sent in by my viewer, What's That Smell? And they would like to know, has my nose improved since I first got into fragrances? And then they followed on with, what is my least favourite fragrance? And is there any fragrances that I tend to smell everywhere? So I would say yes, that my nose has improved since I got into fragrances. A little bit of a strange story with that. So quite a few years ago, I suffered with a medical condition with my sinuses, where I just seemed to be allergic to everything. I was always like really stuffed up. I couldn't breathe properly through my nose. I couldn't smell properly. You know, it would sort of like come and go, but I would tend to suffer with it quite badly, used to suffer with hay fever quite a lot as well. So there was a period of time where I didn't really wear fragrances and I didn't really buy them, just simply because I couldn't really smell them. And there was a really funny time where I was traveling on a bus, and then at some point on the journey, I started smelling this really nice fragrance, and I was like kind of like looking around and thinking like, who's wearing that? That smells really nice. And it smelled so good that I was actually considering like figuring out who actually was wearing this fragrance and just kind of like tapping them on the shoulder and being like, excuse me mate, sorry, I know this is a bit weird, but what's the name of your fragrance that you're wearing? But like obviously I didn't really have the confidence to do that, and he probably thought it would have been a little bit weird. So I was just kind of sat there and I was like, oh well, maybe I'll just find it one day. But that is a really nice fragrance. It's only when I got to my destination, after about an hour or so, that I was sitting down and I started smelling the fragrance again, but there was nobody around, and that's when I realized that it was actually my fragrance that I was wearing. It was one that I'd put on earlier that morning, and because I was like suffering with my kind of like allergies, when I sprayed it on, I couldn't really smell it. So that's the kind of thing that used to happen. Now, luckily, over the years, with some therapy and some medication, the condition has got a lot better. I'm still not fully cured, because unfortunately it's a condition that can't be cured. But I would say I was a good 65-70% free of the condition, so I'm able to smell and breathe a lot more now. As for fragrances that I don't particularly like, there hasn't been many that I have come across that I haven't liked. However, recently I was visiting a kind of like a designer high street clothing store for men. I don't really want to kind of like say the name, but they also sell a small kind of selection of men's fragrances, and some of them were actually on a sale. So when I was in there, I thought, oh, you know what, I'll just sort of like try some of them and see what they were like. Now, there was one that I really didn't like. I really wasn't a fan of it at all. In fact, I actually thought it smelled quite disgusting. And the reason is because it smelled like spraying yourself in Scotch whiskey. Now, there's nothing wrong with Scotch whiskey, and those who drink Scotch whiskey, and even if you like the smell of Scotch whiskey, or if you chose to wear a fragrance that smelled like Scotch whiskey, obviously that's your personal choice. Haven't got anything against that. But for me personally, I really don't like Scotch whiskey, which is kind of ironic because I'm actually half Scottish. But no, I'm not a fan of Scotch whiskey, so I smelt this fragrance and I was like, well, it literally turned my stomach. Considering I don't like whiskey, walking around smelling of Scotch whiskey is obviously not going to be kind of like my thing, my cup of tea. So that's the one that I really hated the most. And also as well, not really fragrances that I would personally wear, but some of the more kind of like feminine fragrances, if they are really kind of like floral, overly floral, especially if they have quite strong notes of kind of like roses. I tend not to like those because they kind of like make me sneeze and they set off my hay fever. And it's probably not really something that you would get in a fragrance. You may do, but I am highly allergic to lilies. So if I walk into a room and there's a bunch of lilies in there, literally within about 20 seconds, my eyes will start burning and I'll just start sneezing. Fragrances that I tend to kind of like smell everywhere. I guess kind of like in the way of kind of like masculine fragrances, the ones that I tend to smell quite a lot is the CK1 and also the Sauvage by Dior as well, whether that's like the original Sauvage or whether it's a duplicate or not. So I tend to smell those two fragrances the most. Thank you for sending in those questions, and I hope that I've answered those accurately for you. So let's move on to the next question. So this next question has been sent in by the viewer user formerly known as T, and they would like to know, outside of fragrances, what's the worst smell you've ever experienced? So yeah, a little bit of a story. So many years ago, when I lived in a different part of the town, there was a kind of footpath that used to go between some woodland area and like a railway line. And me and my sister used to walk through there quite a lot when my nephew was a toddler. When we used to walk to take him to nursery during the mornings. Now, just behind this woodland area was kind of like some sort of like some factories and that kind of thing. And one of those factories was kind of involved in some kind of like metal work or like metal fabrication and like metal galvanizing. And at particular times of the day, usually in the mornings, this factory would, I guess, release some kind of like byproduct or like waste product or some kind of chemical or something. during their galvanizing process. And I kid you not, it was like the worst smell imaginable. Now, I'm not sure how to describe this smell. Now, if you're having your dinner or you're just about to eat your lunch, I suggest muting the video while I explain this, because this is quite disgusting. So the only way I could describe it is that it smelt like raw sewage, so basically feces, rotting meat mixed with burnt hair. And it was really, really strong. I mean, it was acrid. It would like get in your eyes and in your mouth. The most disgusting smell I've ever experienced in my entire life. In fact, it was so strong and so bad one morning that it actually made my little nephew cry, because the smell was just absolutely horrendous. So I'm not entirely sure what that byproduct was. If you have any knowledge with kind of like galvanizing or metal fabrication, and you know what that kind of byproduct or waste product is, feel free to drop it in the comments below, because I have no idea what it was, but it was the smell was just absolutely horrific. It just smelled like death. So that, to answer your question, that is the worst smell that I've ever experienced. So thank you for sending in that question. Whoops, nearly forgot. They would also like to know if there's any kind of like weird or strange smells that I actually quite like. So yes, there is. One of them is I quite like the smell of like tar. Or like tarmac. So when they've just kind of like laid down the asphalt on the roads and they're putting the tarmac and the tar on it, I actually quite like that smell. I also like the smell of kind of like old diesel trains. So that's a bit strange. I also like the smell of creosote. Jet fuel, so like kerosene, sort of like the smell of burning jet fuel, and I also like the smell of pine disinfectant. I know a lot of people kind of like don't like that smell because it's quite strong, but for me, I find it quite a clean smell, so I quite like it. So yeah, so there's a couple of different what some people would consider strange smells that I actually like. Now that doesn't mean that I'm going to be going around sticking my head in cans of diesel or jet fuel, but there just tends to be a kind of smell that I actually like. So yeah, so once again, thank you for sending in your question. Okay, so the next question has been sent in by the viewer Jane the Jubilant, and they would like to know, is there any fragrances or fragrance notes which negatively affect me, such as making me sneeze or tickling my nose? And they also go on to say that they love my personal taste in clothes and accessories, and how I've designed my home, my living space. And they would like to hear me talk a little bit about what influences my personal style. So to answer your first question, yes, so fragrances that tend to have a lot of Hedione or ISO-E super in there tends to kind of like give me a bit of a headache after a while. And depending on how much is actually in the fragrance, those headaches can actually kind of like lead on to migraines sometimes as well. So if a fragrance has got quite a lot of those ingredients in there, I'll either use it sparingly or just avoid it altogether. As for kind of like tickling my nose or making me sneeze, some of them do. But like I mentioned earlier, when I answered another viewer's question, the ones that tend to affect me the most are ones that other people wear. So such as like really floral perfumes. Especially if they have notes of kind of like roses or like flowers, they will make me sneeze quite a lot, to the point where even if somebody just, you know, briefly passes me in the street and they're wearing one of those perfumes and it gets in my nose, I'll just start sneezing in the middle of the street, and people are kind of like looking around thinking like, what's his problem? So yeah, and the second part of your question was about about my personal taste in clothes and accessories and how I've designed my living space. So that's a nice compliment, so thank you very much for that. So I guess my kind of like taste in clothes and accessories just comes from years of kind of being into kind of like alternative kind of music. So in my younger years, I was like a bit of a goth, and quite alternative, a bit of a rocker. Now, as I've got older, obviously I've toned that down quite a lot as well. So I tend to kind of look a little bit more kind of like, I guess what some people would say hipster these days. But, you know, I still like to be a little bit alternative sometimes. So, you know, just in my kind of like day-to-day life, I will wear quite a lot of dark or black clothing. Now, what's funny actually is that during my cursed fragrances review that I did, I was wearing kind of like a black outfit, and I was also wearing a kind of like gothic pendant. Now, Cursed Fragrances actually saw that review, so they actually watched it, which I wasn't expecting at all. So that's totally awesome. And they left me a really nice comment as well. And they actually commented on my outfit, about how I was dressed all in black and how that it was like perfect. The perfect outfit for reviewing their fragrances. Now that was kind of like accidentally on purpose. So I would have worn that outfit during one of my other reviews as well. So there was a kind of like a little bit of coincidence involved in that as well. But I did, when I chose to wear that outfit, did actually think to myself, do you know what, that's actually going to be a really good outfit to review these fragrances. So a little bit more about my kind of like style and sort of, you know, my accessories and my living space and all that kind of stuff. So for pretty much most of my life, I've had kind of like a bit of interest in esoterica. So I really love, you know, all that kind of things related to the esoteric. So that's kind of like influenced a lot of my style, as well as kind of like my music taste over the years as well. So, you know, I will probably go into a little bit more detail about that maybe in another video, if you're, you know, if people are interested to know. But yeah, really good question. Thank you for sending that in, and thank you very much for your kind compliment. So the next question has been sent in by the viewer known as the Lady Cleo, and they would like to know, have I ever had any funny or embarrassing experiences with fragrances that I've worn, or alternatively, have I ever had any funny or embarrassing reactions to fragrances that others are wearing? Now, I can't say that I've personally had any kind of like embarrassing stories with any of the fragrances that I've worn, but there was one time where, ironically enough, I'd actually had an appointment with my asthma and allergy nurse, and when I attended the appointment, she was wearing one of those really like pungent floral rosy kind of smelling perfumes that was just filling the entire room. So of course, as soon as I walked in, I started sneezing, and she was like, "Oh, you're really suffering with your allergies today, aren't you, Anthony?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think it might be your perfume." And I was like, don't take that the wrong way. I was like, but like certain perfumes, I'm like really allergic to certain perfumes. And she was like, oh my gosh, I am so sorry. I didn't think this morning when I applied my perfume that it would affect you so negatively. And I was like, oh, okay. I was like, calm down. It's like it's not your fault. I'm not saying that it's your fault. I'm just saying that the reason why I'm suffering so badly, like right now, right this moment, is because I think I might be allergic to your perfume. Maybe I shouldn't have said anything. I think I embarrassed her quite a bit actually, but I honestly didn't mean to. I didn't mean it like that. She was an allergy nurse, so I was just explaining that you're wearing a perfume that I'm allergic to. It's like part of why I'm here, kind of thing. And then she was kind of like, do you know what? I've never even considered that. Considering I'm an allergy nurse, I've never considered that my perfume might cause to trigger people's allergies. And then she started like questioning her choices, and she was like, maybe I shouldn't do that in future. And I was kind of like, whoa, I really honestly didn't mean for this to get so kind of like sort of like deep and philosophical. Almost couldn't say that word then. So that was pretty embarrassing. More probably embarrassing for her. But I was a little bit embarrassed afterwards because I was kind of thinking to myself, actually, maybe I shouldn't have just said anything at all. Those are really, really good questions. Thank you for sending those in. In fact, all of the questions that you've sent in have been absolutely brilliant. Really genuine, kind of like wholesome questions. And I'm really, really enjoying answering these. Now, the last question that has been sent in is from a user called Liam GD4QI, and Liam would like to know. It's not so much a question; it's more of like how I would react to a certain situation. So Liam basically wants to know. Say that if I came home one day and I caught a whiff of like a funny smell, how would I react? Would I try and cover it up? Would I try and discover where the smell was coming from? So that kind of thing. Now I've got the perfect story for you, Liam, to answer all of your questions. And it involves a time when I woke up one morning and was immediately hit in the face by a kind of like really like damp smell. The kind of smell that you would get if like there was like a flood in your house, like a burst pipe. So the kind of like the smell of like wet carpets and wet plasterboard, kind of like stagnant pond water, like that kind of smell. So I was kind of like lying in bed and I was thinking, oh no, like there's been a leak. I'm going to get up and I'm going to find that like a pipe has burst somewhere. There's just going to be water everywhere. So I was kind of like dreading it. So I got up and immediately started trying to investigate where the smell was coming from. And it was really weird because it didn't matter which room I was in, I could still smell it. So it was just like really strong in every room. And I was thinking like, where's this smell coming from? Like, and I was getting really worried. I was thinking there's like a pipe burst like under the floorboards or in the wall, and like the floor's going to cave in or something. So I was like hunting around for ages. I was like checking all the carpets, all the walls. I was looking up at the ceiling to see if I could see if there was any kind of like water stains on the ceiling. I was on my hands and knees, like feeling the carpets, like pulling them up in the corners of the room. I even, I was opening all the cupboards. I even went up into the attic to see if there was any kind of leaks up there. Now, I didn't have any step ladders at the time, and I'd rather not explain how I got up into the attic, because I very nearly didn't get back down again. But yeah, I couldn't find this smell anywhere. I opened the windows, trying to get rid of the smell. Excuse me. I was putting shake and vac down on the carpets. I was using kind of like wax melt diffusers, air fresheners. And then as soon as the fragrance is worn off, this smell would come back again. And it lasted for like a good couple of days until it just kind of like completely vanished. It just went. And I thought, okay, so if something was flooded, then obviously it's dried out now. And then I was thinking, well, actually, maybe it was the neighbour's house that was flooded. Maybe he got flooded, and that's where the smell was coming from. And then maybe now he's sorted it out and cleaned it up. But then I started getting really worried and thinking, well, what if he's not there? And what if he's away and like his house is flooded and like he's going to come home? So I was getting like really paranoid. And it was only a few days later, while I was driving through a certain part of kind of like my local area, I could smell the same smell coming through the vents of my car. And it was really strong, like really almost kind of like acrid. There was a slightly chemical smell to it as well. So I was thinking, all right, okay, this is interesting. So the smell is actually in the air. It's not coming from my house at all, which would explain why I couldn't find it. And it was driving me crazy for days because I kept smelling it for days and days and days and days in the same area. I even went out on foot for walks to see if it was coming from like any like local areas. I couldn't figure out where it was coming from. And it was only about a week later, while my friend was in the car with me, and I was kind of like, oh, there's that like really damp smell again. I can really smell it. And he told me what it was. So basically, about a mile, maybe just over a mile or so down the road, is a timber yard. And what happened is that some of their stock, some of their timber, had actually kind of like got wet in a storm, and it had gone really kind of like moldy. So what was actually happening is that the wind, the breeze, was actually blowing the smell of like this mold all over the entire area, and it was just getting into people's houses and stuff. So that was like a little bit strange. It did drive me absolutely crazy because I just had no idea where the smell was coming from. Luckily, it wasn't actually coming from my house. So so great questions, Liam. Thank you for sending those in. Now, the last question that I'm going to answer hasn't been sent in by a viewer. It was actually asked by a friend of mine. Now, she already knows the answer to this question, so I don't know why she asked me. But for some reason, she was really compelled to ask me to answer it during the video. I think what's more likely is that she wants you guys to know the answer to this. So she asked, who is my favourite female singer, and then also who is my favourite male singer as well. So great question, actually. So my favourite female singer is somebody called Sharon Den Ardell. And if you're familiar with her, she is the lead singer in a band called Within Temptation, and they are kind of like a symphonic, like gothic metal band. Absolutely love her voice. It is just what I would describe as hauntingly beautiful. And then for kind of like my favourite male singer is a guy called Howard Jones. And Howard Jones was the lead singer and frontman in a band called Killswitch Engage for many years. And now he has got a different band. So he's the singer in a different band called Light the Torch. Really, really like his voice. Even though it's kind of like a metal band, his voice is like really, really soulful. A lot of soul in it, and it's almost kind of like a little bit operatic as well. So those are my favourite singers. and they're also some of my favourite bands as well. So that might give you a little bit of a clue of the kinds of music that I like to listen to. But yeah, so we are at the end of the Q&A session now. I've really enjoyed this today, folks. So thank you so much for sending in your questions. Really good questions, and I've enjoyed answering all of those. And also thank you to the viewer who basically gave me the idea or suggestion for doing a Q&A video. Now I'm going to be back really soon with some more fragrance reviews, and I'm also going to be doing some of these reviews in different locations around my area and a little bit further out of town as well, so maybe it's some kind of like English heritage sites and that kind of thing. So I'm really looking forward to doing those for you. Now if you have liked this video, it would mean the world to me if you could go ahead and hit that thumbs up button. And if you have not yet subscribed to this channel and you do enjoy videos like this and videos where we do first impressions and reviews on fragrances, it would mean the world to me if you could go ahead and subscribe to my channel. But I'm going to leave it there for today, folks. Thank you so much for tuning into this video, and I will see all of you again really soon. Thanks for watching. Bye. Bye, see ya.